April 21, 1943. North Atlantic, 03:17 hours. The control room of U-boat U-402 smells of oil, damp wool, and cold metal. Red lamps glow faintly against steel walls as the submarine glides at depth, engines throttled down to a near whisper. The sea presses in from all sides, thousands of tons of black water holding the hull like a clenched fist. Captain Lieutenant Siegfried von Forstner stands calm at the periscope well, one hand resting lightly on a chart table. He has done this dozens of times. Too many, some would say. But confidence comes easily when you've survived convoy after convoy, when British escorts drop depth charges too shallow, too scattered, too late. Around him, his officers exchange low remarks. Someone smirks. Allied sonar, the first officer mutters, still chasing ghosts. A few quiet chuckles ripple through the control room. They've heard the pings before, hollow, distant, clumsy sounds echoing uselessly through the Atlantic. ASDIC, the British call it. A toy, a machine that listens where the ocean lies. For years, U-boat crews have learned to live with it. Dive deeper, slow the screws, let the sea swallow you. The ocean has always favored silence. The hydrophone operator lifts one ear cup, listening more out of habit than concern. Static, faint propeller noise far off to port, nothing urgent, nothing close. Von Forstner nods. He orders a minor course adjustment, smooth and unhurried. The boat responds like a trained animal, steel muscles flexing gently. Above them, somewhere unseen, Allied escort ships sweep empty water, or so the Germans believe. Another officer leans in, voice barely audible over the hum of machinery. They'll lose us again, they always do. The U-boat slips forward, invisible, undefeated. For the men inside, the war still feels tilted in their favor. In this moment, they are hunters, not prey. Then it happens. A sound sharp, clean, unmistakable. Ping. Not distant, not wandering. Direct. The control room goes still. Conversation dies mid-breath. Every head turns toward the hydrophone station. The operator freezes, eyes wide. His fingers tighten on the headphones as the sound returns, louder now, precise, almost deliberate. Ping! It cuts through the steel hull like a hammer on glass. Von Forstner straightens. He doesn't speak, he doesn't need to. Because this isn't the sloppy sonar they've mocked before. This ping doesn't search. It knows. And for the first time since the war began, the men of U-402 feel something unfamiliar creeping into the room, not panic, not fear. But doubt. The hydrophone operator swallows hard. Contact bearing steady, he says quietly, voice tighter than before. Same frequency, same interval. Another ping rolls through the hull. This one feels closer. Von Forstner moves to the hydrophone station himself, bending slightly so he can watch the operator's face rather than the instruments. Years at sea have taught him one rule above all others: machines lie, men don't. And the man in front of him looks like he's listening to something alive. How far? The captain asks. The operator hesitates. That pause is new. Too close to be guessing, Herr Calhoun. The control room shifts. A subtle change, but everyone feels it. Shoulders tense, boots reposition on the steel deck. A few men glance instinctively upward as if they can see through meters of pressure, hull, and black water. Another ping. Same rhythm, same bearing. The escorts aren't sweeping randomly anymore, they're holding them. Von Forstner orders speed reduced to dead slow. The electric motors wind down until the boat barely moves, a drifting shadow in the depths. He signals for silence, discipline, no unnecessary movement, no dropped tools, no whispered prayers. Still the ping returns. Not louder, not softer. Patient. It's not hunting. It's tracking. Somewhere above, an Allied escort commander, perhaps aboard a Flower-class corvette or a newly outfitted destroyer escort, watches a glowing trace settle and refuse to fade. The technology has changed since 1941. Improved transducers, better training, operators who no longer chase echoes but wait for them to repeat. The Germans feel it without seeing it. The ocean no longer feels empty. A junior officer leans close to the captain. They should have lost us by now. Von Forstner doesn't answer. Instead, he listens. The ping returns again, now accompanied by something worse, faint propeller noise. not retreating, not circling wide. Closing. The captain makes a decision. Rig for depth charges, he says calmly, take her down another 50 meters. The ballast tanks flood. The U-boat angles downward, hull creaking softly as pressure builds. Men brace themselves, sweat beads despite the cold. For a moment, hope flickers, the ping stretches out slightly, the interval lengthens. Then it snaps back. Closer than before. The hydrophone operator removes one ear cup, shaking his head almost imperceptibly. They adjusted. Adjusted. That word lands harder than any depth charge ever has. Because it means the enemy didn't lose them, didn't guess, didn't panic. They listened. And learned. The first distant thump rolls through the water, not an explosion yet, but the unmistakable sound of depth charges entering the sea. More follow. The pattern tightens. Von Forstner grips the edge of the chart table. He realizes something that will never make it into a communique or a medal citation. The Atlantic has changed sides. And the next sound won't be a ping. The first depth charge detonates off the port bow. It's not close enough to rupture the hull, not yet, but the shockwave slams through U-402 like a giant fist. Lights flicker, gauges shudder. Somewhere aft, metal screams as a pipe bracket tears loose and crashes to the deck. Men flinch, no one speaks. Von Forstner doesn't look at them. He keeps his eyes on the depth gauge, watching the needle quiver as the submarine continues its slow descent. 170 meters, 180. Another explosion, closer this time. The sound is not loud so much as total. It fills the water, the hull, the bones. You can almost feel your teeth vibrate inside your skull. The escorts above aren't guessing anymore. They're bracketing. The hydrophone operator grips his headset with both hands now, knuckles white. They're holding contact through the explosions, he says. His voice cracks despite his effort to keep it steady. They're correcting after every detonation. That shouldn't be possible, not with the old assumptions, not with the ocean churning like this. But Allied sonar has learned how to listen through chaos. Von Forstner orders a hard rudder turn, then another. The boat slews sideways, electric motors straining as the helmsman tries to throw off the solution. For a few precious seconds, the ping stutters. Then it locks back on. Another charge detonates almost directly overhead. The hull bows inward with a deep, stomach-turning groan. Paint flakes rain from the ceiling. A valve begins to leak, a thin needle of seawater hissing into the compartment. A sailor clamps it shut with shaking hands. The captain finally understands what's happening, not just tactically but psychologically. This isn't a chase. It's an execution carried out slowly, methodically, with machines that no longer rush. Above them, the escort commander orders the pattern tightened. The sonar operator doesn't shout, he doesn't need to, the trace is steady, calm, certain. Below, the U-boat sinks deeper than doctrine recommends, 210 meters, 220. The pressure hull complains with every meter, rivets creak, plates flex. Men begin to imagine the sea pushing inward, centimeter by centimeter, waiting for a mistake. Then the pings stop. Silence floods the control room. For one breath, hope surges. Maybe they finally slipped free, maybe the escorts overshot. The hydrophone operator lifts his head slowly. No, he says. He doesn't need to explain. The silence isn't absence. It's anticipation. Because the escorts have stopped pinging, not because they lost contact, but because they don't need to listen anymore. They know exactly where U-402 is. And the next attack will be the last. The silence stretches. In the control room, it feels heavier than the explosions ever did. Men stop breathing without realizing it, as if oxygen itself might betray them. The only sound is the low electrical hum of the motors and the faint, rhythmic creak of steel under pressure. Von Forstner knows this silence. He has used it himself. It is the pause before certainty. Maintain depth, he orders softly, no sudden moves. The helmsman nods, eyes fixed forward, sweat runs down his temple despite the cold. A single wrong correction could echo through the hull, a single clank could give them away. But they are already given away. Up above, the Allied escorts have changed behavior. Instead of circling tightly, they widen slightly, spacing themselves with practiced precision. This is no longer art or instinct, it is calculation. Distance, speed, sink rate. The ocean has been turned into a grid. The hydrophone operator suddenly stiffens. Multiple screws, he whispers, 2 no, 3 escorts. Von Forstner closes his eyes for half a second. 3 ships mean a coordinated pattern, 1 to hold contact, 2 to deliver. A faint sound returns, not a ping, but something worse. A splash. Then another. Depth charges entering the water, not rushed, not panicked, dropped at exact intervals like punctuation marks. The first explosion is distant, intentionally so. The second walks closer. The third is closer still. The boat shudders violently, a light shatters, plunging part of the compartment into darkness. A man is thrown against the bulkhead, grunting in pain but making no sound beyond that. Everyone has learned the cost of noise. Water sprays from a ruptured gasket, misting the air with salt. The smell of ozone and oil thickens. Von Forstner realizes the escorts are no longer adjusting after each blast. They don't need to. They are letting gravity do the work. The charges are set deeper now, tuned for this exact depth band. Allied intelligence has studied captured U-boats, learned their tolerances, learned how German commanders think. For years, the Atlantic was a place where skill and nerve could overcome technology. Not anymore. Down 10 meters, the captain orders. The gauge creeps lower, 230 meters. This depth is dangerous, officially discouraged. The hull was never meant to linger here. Another explosion detonates almost alongside the boat. The hull flexes inward with a sickening moan. A seam opens near the stern. Water pours in, not as a spray now, but as a steady, unstoppable stream. Damage control moves instantly, stuffing rags, tightening clamps, fighting physics with hands and hope. The hydrophone operator suddenly pulls the headphones away, gasping. They're above us, dead center. That's when it hits Von Forstner, not fear but clarity. The escorts are no longer chasing a submarine. They are managing a problem whose solution is inevitable. He thinks of earlier patrols, of nights on the surface, diesel engines roaring, stars overhead, victories logged with chalk on the conning tower. He remembers laughing at British sonar reports in mess halls, calling them crude, calling them blind. Now the blindness belongs to the men inside U-402. Another charge detonates so close that the deck plates buckle. A gauge needle snaps clean off. Somewhere aft, a man cries out before biting the sound back into his throat. The lights go out completely. Emergency lamps flicker on, bathing the control room in sickly yellow. Faces look hollow now, smaller. Von Forstner grips the periscope housing to steady himself. He understands the final truth of 1943. This war beneath the waves is no longer about daring escapes or clever tricks. It is about detection, and detection has caught up. Above them, the escorts prepare the next pattern. Below, the pressure hull whispers its limits. And for the first time, the captain cannot imagine a command that changes what comes next. The next depth charge detonates directly beneath U-402. Not beside, not above. Under. The shock lifts the submarine like a kicked animal. Men are thrown off their feet. The deck seems to rise and fall in a single violent breath. Somewhere deep in the hull, metal tears, not a sharp snap, but a long, awful rip like fabric being pulled apart under strain. A warning light flares red, then dies. The chief engineer shouts damage reports that barely register. Words like stern compartment, pressure loss, bulkhead deformation float through the control room without meaning. The truth is already written in the way the boat lists, in the way the depth gauge no longer responds cleanly. Water is coming in faster now. Von Forstner steadies himself against the chart table. His voice, when he speaks, is calm, frighteningly so. Blow negative tank, slow ascent. It is not an order to escape. It is an order to survive a little longer. Compressed air roars through the tanks. The boat shudders as trapped water is forced out. For a brief, fragile moment, the descent slows, the depth gauge hesitates. Then the leaks worsen. Another charge explodes above them as if to remind the crew who controls the vertical dimension of this fight. The escorts are not letting them rise, they are not letting them settle. They are keeping the U-boat exactly where it is most vulnerable. The hydrophone operator no longer listens. He sits frozen, headphones hanging loose around his neck. There is nothing left to hear that matters. The sea has already spoken. A sailor near the forward bulkhead whispers a prayer, then stops himself, eyes darting toward the captain as if sound itself might still be punished. Von Forstner looks around the control room, really looks, perhaps for the first time. These are not symbols of a campaign or numbers in a tonnage war. These are men who trusted him when he told them the ocean could still be outsmarted. The hull creaks again, deeper this time, a sound like a groan pulled from the chest of the ship itself. Water sprays from multiple seams now, cold and relentless. The pumps struggle, then fall behind. The boat begins to sink once more. Above the escort's weight. They do not rush the final blow, there is no need, fuel is plentiful, depth charges are stacked, time is on their side. This is the new Atlantic. Not a place of ambush and escape, but a place where patience kills. Von Forstner gives his last meaningful order not to the crew but to himself. He removes his cap, wiping condensation from the brim, and sets it carefully on the chart table. A small, human gesture in a steel tomb. Another explosion hammers the hull. The lights flicker. And then, in the brief yellow glow, the captain understands something that will echo far beyond this sinking boat. The Allies did not defeat the U-boats with courage alone. They defeated them by teaching machines how to listen, and by trusting what those machines heard. The ocean, once an ally, has become an informant. And it never forgets. The final explosion doesn't sound different. That's the cruel part. There's no dramatic crescendo, no warning note to mark the end. Just another controlled detonation, perfectly placed, delivered by men who already know the result. This time the hull does not groan. It fails. A seam in the stern compartment splits wide. Water surges in with unstoppable force, not spraying, not leaking, but flooding, heavy, absolute, final. The boat pitches downward sharply, the deck tilting beneath their boots. Men grab for handholds, one is thrown hard against the bulkhead and doesn't rise. The depth gauge spins. Compressed air howls uselessly through valves that no longer matter. The pumps choke, then fall silent as power falters. Emergency lights flicker once, twice, then go dark. In the sudden blackness, the ocean takes over. Von Forstner feels the pressure in his chest before he understands it, the unmistakable sensation of steel collapsing inward, millimeter by millimeter. The hull is no longer holding the sea back, it is negotiating and losing. There are no more orders to give. No maneuvers left to try. Only the sound of rushing water, metal tearing, and the distant, muted thunder of the sea reclaiming what has trespassed too long beneath it. Above, the Allied escorts slow their engines. Sonar screens show the contact breaking apart, the clean trace dissolving into chaos, then fading entirely. The sonar operator removes his headphones, already certain of what the instruments confirm. Silence. Not the hunted silence of a submarine hiding. The permanent kind. The escort commander notes the time and position in his log. Another U-boat gone. Another entry in a war increasingly decided by data, coordination, and machines that never grow tired. There is no cheering on deck. Just quiet professionalism. Because by 1943, this outcome is becoming familiar. Far beneath the surface, U-402 disappears into the Atlantic, its crew never knowing their exact attackers' names, never seeing the ships that ended them. The ocean closes behind the wreck as if nothing ever passed through. And with it sinks an idea, the belief that skill, nerve, and silence alone can defeat a listening enemy. The German U-boat arm will continue to fight, men will still dive, still hope, still trust the deep. But the balance has shifted. From this point forward, the Atlantic is no longer a dark hunting ground. It is a measured space, watched, tracked, calculated. A place where one perfect ping can turn the hunter into a coordinate. And where silence, once a shield, becomes a sentence.